My name is Natalie Bennett. I'm 36 years old and I work as a trauma ICU nurse at a hospital in Nashville, Tennessee. I've spent almost 14 years pulling strangers back from the edge of death in the middle of the night. But nothing prepared me for the morning I stood outside my own sister's wedding, dressed in the pale blue gown I'd bought for the occasion, and watched a security guard check his list twice before telling me, quietly, that my name wasn't on it. Welcome back to the Family Revenge Tales. I want to tell you what happened that morning at Willow Creek Estate, just outside Franklin, Tennessee. But to really understand it, you have to go back 14 years, to the night everything in my family changed. I was 22, finishing my last semester of nursing school, when my father died. Michael Bennett was a good man, the kind who whistled while he made pancakes on Saturday mornings and called me Nat Girl until the day he was gone. He managed construction projects, and one afternoon, a scaffolding collapse took him from us in a way that felt too sudden and too cruel to be real. My mother, Elaine, was left with a business in disarray, unpaid taxes, frozen accounts, and a 14-year-old daughter, my little sister, Avery, who had no idea how close we were to losing everything. I remember coming home late one night after a study session and finding my mother sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by bills, her hands shaking as she tried to make numbers that simply didn't add up. She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Real fear. "Natalie," she said, "I need you to promise me something." I sat down across from her. "Anything, Mom." "Avery can never know how bad this is. She's already lost her father. I won't let her grow up thinking we're drowning. Whatever we do to keep this family afloat, it stays between us." I promised. I was 22 years old, and I didn't fully understand what I was agreeing to. I thought it meant helping out here and there, maybe picking up a part-time job. I didn't know it meant the next 14 years of my life. I graduated and took a position in the trauma ICU at St. Matthew Regional Medical Center. I worked overnight shifts, weekends, holidays, anything with a pay differential, I took it. And every single paycheck, after covering my own modest rent, went straight into an account that fed into my mother's finances. I paid the overdue property taxes on our family home. I covered the insurance. I quietly paid off my father's remaining business debts so creditors would stop calling. When Avery got into college, I paid her tuition, her housing, her books. When her car broke down her sophomore year, I paid for a new one and let my mother tell her it was a graduation gift from Dad's life insurance, even though there was barely any life insurance left by then. Every transaction ran through my mother's accounts. Every check, every wire transfer, it all had her name on it by the time it reached Avery. Nobody but the two of us knew where the money actually came from. I want to be honest with you. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I loved my sister, and I loved the idea of her having a normal life, a life where she didn't have to carry the weight I carried. But somewhere along the way, something started to shift. My mother didn't just protect Avery from the truth. She began rewriting it. I'd miss Thanksgiving because I was working a trauma shift, and by Christmas, my mother would tell relatives, "Natalie's just never been close to this family. She'd rather be anywhere else." I'd miss Avery's college graduation because a multi-car pileup came through the ER, and somehow, by the next family gathering, that absence became evidence that I only cared about my career. Every sacrifice I made in silence became, in my mother's retelling, another brick in the wall of a story where she was the resilient single mother who'd held everything together through sheer will and faith, and I was the daughter who'd walked away. I didn't fight it. I told myself the truth didn't matter as long as Avery was safe and happy. But truth has a way of costing you, even when you bury it. Avery and I drifted, not because we stopped loving each other, but because the distance my mother built between us, brick by brick, story by story, became too wide to cross with a phone call. Our conversations got shorter, our texts got quieter. There were years where I genuinely didn't know if my sister still loved me, or if she'd simply absorbed the version of me my mother had constructed. Then, about 18 months ago, everything started to change, though I didn't see it coming. I was working a night shift when a man named Thomas Whitaker was brought into the ICU after a devastating interstate collision. Most of the team thought he was stable. I didn't. Something in his vitals kept nagging at me, and I insisted we run another scan. Minutes later, he crashed, internal bleeding we almost missed. We got him back. I stayed with him through that night and several after, the way I always do with patients who scare me the most. He never knew my last name. He only knew me as Natalie, the nurse who wouldn't leave his bedside. I had no idea at the time that Thomas Whitaker's son was named Ryan, and I had no idea that Ryan Whitaker would a year later propose to my sister. Avery called me the night she got engaged. It was the first real conversation we'd had in months. "Nat, I want you there," she said. "Not just at the wedding. I mean, really there. I feel like we lost each other somewhere, and I don't know how it happened." I cried after we hung up. I hadn't let myself hope for that in a long time. Avery dreamed of getting married at Willow Creek Estate, a beautiful venue outside Franklin known for its wide lawns and slow, deliberate elegance. A cancellation opened up a date, and Avery was ecstatic. Until the venue explained that securing the booking required a financially responsible guarantor, someone who would legally back the costs of the event. My mother came to me quietly, the way she always did. "Natalie, I can't qualify on my own. You know I can't. Could you sign as the guarantor? Just like everything else, nobody has to know." I said yes. I always said yes. I sat in a lawyer's office and signed the paperwork myself, becoming, on record, the one person legally responsible for the entire wedding. I told myself it didn't matter who knew. I just wanted my sister to have her day. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, something unexpected happened. Avery started asking questions, small ones at first. Wait, who paid for my apartment deposit senior year? And didn't Dad's insurance run out way before that car? I didn't answer directly. I'd promised my mother silence, and old promises are hard habits to break. But I could hear it in her voice. She was starting to notice cracks in a story that had never quite made sense. My mother noticed too, and I think that terrified her more than anything. The morning of the wedding, I drove out to Willow Creek Estate with my heart full in a way I hadn't felt in years. I wore a pale blue dress I'd bought specifically because Avery once said blue was my color. I walked toward the entrance, past white lattice arches dripping with flowers, past bridesmaids in soft champagne dresses who suddenly stopped talking as I approached. A security guard with a tablet stepped in front of me. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, I don't have your name on the list." "There must be a mistake. I'm the bride's sister, Natalie Bennett." He checked again, his brow furrowing. "I'm sorry, you've actually been marked for removal this morning." I felt the ground tilt slightly beneath me. I looked past him and saw my mother standing near the entrance in a soft gold dress, watching the whole exchange without moving toward me. I walked closer, and she met my eyes with a calm, practiced composure that I recognized instantly. The same calm she used whenever she was about to say something devastating and dress it up as wisdom. "Mom," I said quietly, "what is this?" She glanced at the small crowd of relatives gathering nearby, then spoke loud enough for several of them to hear. "Natalie, this is Avery's day. I think it's best if we keep things simple. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who chooses to stay." I felt something in my chest crack open, slow and quiet, like ice giving way beneath still water. 14 years of missed holidays, of overnight shifts, of silent sacrifice, of a promise I'd kept even when it cost me my own sister. All of it stood behind her words, like a shadow only I could see. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry in front of them, though I wanted to. "Then today," I said, "you'll finally see what staying really looks like." I turned and walked back toward the parking area, past the flowers, past the whispers I could feel more than hear behind me. I sat in my car for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, and let myself breathe. I don't know exactly how long I sat there before my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, a woman identifying herself as the venue's event accountant. "Ms. Bennett," she said, her voice tight with concern. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but we have a serious issue. Our records show you're the legal financial guarantor for today's event. We were just informed you'd been removed from the guest list and denied entry, but no one had the authority to do that without your written consent. Legally, this puts the entire event in jeopardy." I sat there, stunned, as she explained that without my presence and consent, the venue couldn't proceed under the terms of the contract. Panic had apparently already started spreading through the staff. I don't think my mother had ever actually read the fine print. I don't think it occurred to her, in her fear of the truth surfacing, that she was about to unravel her own carefully built story in front of everyone she'd spent 14 years trying to impress. While I sat in that parking lot deciding what to do, something else was happening inside. I later learned that Ryan's father, Thomas Whitaker, had overheard the commotion about a guarantor named Natalie Bennett being turned away. Something about the name struck him. He asked to see a photo. When one of the coordinators found an old picture from the guest registration, Thomas went pale. "That's her," he said. "That's the nurse who saved my life." He found Ryan immediately, and within minutes, Ryan found Avery, who was getting her hair pinned into place, utterly unaware of the storm gathering outside the bridal suite. "Avery," Ryan said gently, "I need you to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Who paid for your college, your apartment, this wedding?" Avery blinked at him. "My mom did. She's always—" She stopped. Something in Ryan's expression made the question feel heavier than it should have. "The venue says Natalie is the legal guarantor, not your mom. Natalie signed everything." I imagine, though I wasn't there to see it, the exact moment the last piece fell into place for my sister. The birthday gifts that arrived a little late but always came with cash, the tuition payments that mysteriously cleared right before deadlines during years my mother swore she was barely scraping by, the new car from Dad's insurance, years after that insurance would have run dry. Avery called me from the bridal suite, her voice trembling. "Nat," she said, "is it true? Is it you? Has it always been you?" I closed my eyes. 14 years of silence sat behind my teeth, and for the first time, I let it go. "Yes," I said, "it's always been me." There was a long pause on the line, filled with her breathing, uneven and full of things I couldn't yet name. "I'm so sorry," she finally whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't know. Please, please come back, please." I want to tell you that I drove back to Willow Creek Estate with fire in my chest, ready to stand in front of 150 guests and finally tell them everything my mother had hidden. Part of me wanted that. Part of me had earned that. But when I pulled back into the venue and saw Avery running across the lawn toward me, veil catching in the wind, makeup streaked from crying, I realized revenge was never what I actually wanted. I just wanted to be seen. "I don't want to embarrass anyone," I told her, holding her hands. "Not even Mom. Today is still your day." "It's not just my day anymore," Avery said. "Not without you in it." Ryan walked over next, his father Thomas just behind him, and for a moment, the four of us stood together in a strange, quiet cluster near the edge of the ceremony lawn. Thomas reached for my hand. I never got the chance to properly thank the woman who stayed up all night keeping me alive. I had no idea she'd become family. My mother approached slowly, her gold dress no longer looking quite as composed as it had an hour earlier. She didn't speak right away. For the first time in 14 years, I watched her search for words and come up empty. "Natalie, I don't know how to undo what I said." I told her, and I meant it gently, not as a weapon. "You don't have to undo it today." And I meant it gently, not as a weapon. "But you do have to stop pretending it didn't happen." We didn't have some dramatic, tearful reconciliation right there on the lawn in front of everyone. Real healing rarely works that fast, and I wasn't going to pretend otherwise just to give the guests a tidy moment. Instead, Avery asked if I would walk her down the aisle alongside Ryan and Thomas, and I said yes. As we walked, Avery held a small bouquet wrapped around our father's old leather journal, the one he used to scribble notes in during long nights of planning projects that never quite went the way he expected. Inside the front cover, in his handwriting, were 4 words he'd written to us before he died. "Take care of each other." Avery had carried it with her that morning without knowing yet just how much those words had already shaped the last 14 years of my life. The ceremony went on. It was beautiful, in the quiet, imperfect way real things are beautiful. My mother sat in the front row, composed on the outside, but I could see her hands trembling in her lap the entire time. Months later, at Thanksgiving, with the whole extended family gathered around the table, my mother finally did something I never expected. She stood up, glass in hand, and told the truth. All of it. The hidden payments, the years of credit she'd taken that wasn't hers, the story she'd built about the daughter who left, when really that daughter had never once stopped carrying us. Nobody clapped, nobody cheered. It wasn't that kind of moment. It was quiet, heavy, honest. The kind of moment that doesn't erase 14 years of silence, but finally stops adding to it. Avery and I started having Sunday dinners again after that. Slowly, carefully. We're rebuilding something that was never really broken between the two of us. It just got buried under someone else's fear. My mother and I are still finding our way, one conversation at a time, one boundary at a time. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means choosing not to let what happened define what comes next. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like your sacrifices went unnoticed while someone else took the credit, I want you to hear this. The truth doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a signature on a contract nobody thought to read, in a phone call at the worst possible moment, in a sister finally asking the right question. But it arrives. And when it does, you don't have to choose revenge to feel whole again. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to stay hidden any longer. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to the Family Revenge Tales. Every week, we share real, emotional stories about families finding their way back to honesty, justice, and each other. Because Everyone deserves to be truly seen by the people they love. Hit that subscribe button and join us for more stories like Natalie's. And remember, the love you give quietly still counts, even when no one's watching. One day, the truth finds its way home. This story carries meaningful lessons worth sitting with. It shows how silence, even when meant to protect someone, can slowly become its own kind of harm if it's allowed to erase the truth entirely. It reminds us that real strength often looks like quiet, unglamorous sacrifice rather than public recognition, and that the people who give the most are sometimes the easiest to overlook. The story also teaches the importance of honest communication within families, since so much pain here grew not from lack of love, but from years of unspoken truths and carefully managed appearances. Finally, it offers a powerful lesson about choosing dignity over revenge, that true justice isn't about humiliating those who wronged us, but about finally standing in the light of truth and allowing genuine healing to begin.